What about Guthard? She managed. Guthard will acknowledge you as a wife, Griogr growled, but offers no allegiance to anyone. He hit her head again and Osrith felt a dampness running down her cheek. You kill my brother Colleen, you destroy my chances of becoming king of Alba alone. Osrith screamed as Griogr wrapped chains that he had with him around Osrith's wrists, pulling them so they were fixed to the wall of the cell. You are going to die, slowly. This time, Griogr's hands were not careful. They pulled at what remained of Osrith's dress that Griogr had given to her until she was naked. Are you cold? Let me see. He put his hands to her breasts. Yes, indeed. Osrith squirmed as Griogr smoothed his palms down her sides and around her buttocks. You have a nice body, he murmured. I don't care. She didn't care if men thought that or not. If she could become a man, she would. You should not have killed my brother. He rounded the small of her back with his hands. Osrith winced where her injury from Eric had been. She tried to pull away, but this tightened the chains round her wrists and an ache began in her shoulders. You were assaulting the monastery. You were plotting against Domhnall. Griogr finished the sentence for her. Suddenly, Griogr pulled his hands away, then Osrith felt cold metal by her throat. You will be dead by morning, girl. Griogr snarled by her ear. He pressed the point of the knife into her neck. And I will have enjoy it. He carved a line down her neck to her armpit, under her breast and swept it onto her stomach. Osrith felt the dampness of blood trickle down her ribs. Leave her. A voice, Eric's voice, came from the back of the cell in English. What did she do to you, Scotsman? She disobeyed her lord, Griogr replied, also in English. Then breathed onto Osrith's neck as he sheathed the knife, hands over her body. Eric must be able to see her shame in the moonlight, Osrith thought. Step aside, Scotsman. Griogr paused in his massaging of Osrith's thighs. Oh, a protector, he mocked, stepping away. You, he demanded. Hump her. I will not. I will bring guards and you will hump her so I may watch. No, I will not. This time, incensed, Griogr crunched over the straw. You will put her on her back and push you cock into her hole damned hard because she deserves it. But Eric was not raising his voice. I will not. And, Osrith knew, Griogr knew Eric would only fight the guards if he unchained the Northman, or himself. Instead, he took hold of the surplus chain with which her hands were bound, and began to whip her back and buttocks with it. Your punishment, Griogr said, as he used his might to thrash Osrith, determined not to cry out, lasted seconds, for this was agony as her thighs, chest and head slammed against the cold, stone cell wall. Stop hurting her. She is a warrior. Eric's own chains rattled as he strained at them. A warrior? Called back Griogr. A warrior, eh? He gnarled in Osrith's ear. If the Norseman will not, then it is left to me to remind you that you are a woman. He brought the chain around her neck. She felt dizzy and the chafing of the metal around her wrists and ankles felt distant, as if happening to someone else. Like, on the beach. The sun was dying. Leave her. You have no honor. When I've ridden you till you haven't even the breath to cry out, girl, when your cunt can't take any more, he growled, and with his hands he drove her bottom apart. Another man will take his turn. Then another. And the biggest will be the last until every man in Caligulad is satisfied. He pulled her back so that the rest of the old dress slipped down her legs. She was on display, Osrith knew, as Griogr reached round to her breasts, working her nipples in turn between fingers and thumb. This had the effect of carrying her quickly beyond any pleasure this might have incited, causing them to be rubbed raw and tender as he used all his force to both compress and twist them, before pulling them away from her body. As he tortured her nipples, Griogr hit her legs apart further with his knees, ignoring Eric's voice protesting that he should leave her alone. I am about to ruin you, bitch. Then suddenly, Griogr let go. Osrith panted as a pulse throbbed across her chest. Let him have finished, Osrith prayed silently. But he hadn't. Legs pulled open, hand flat between them, Griogr's fingers, rough and careless, pushed hard across her lumps between her folds, trapping the front bump, rotating it round, before stopping to hit her with his other hand when she cried out, before pressing down and squeezing it as hard as he could while slapping a hand over her mouth to stop her screaming. Some of Griogier's other fingers found her hole and pushed his fingers inwards as far as they would go. 1, then 2. 3 were painful, 4, agonizing. "You are still very tight, Constantine's whore," he whispered, grasping her hair as he fingered her. He increased speed, laughing as her body jerked to his violation, enjoying that he was hurting her. So, Osrith bit his hand covering her mouth. Griogier jumped away, yelling in pain before slapping her head hard. "You still think you are a man?" Griogier's hot breath returned to her ear as he began to push his fingers inside Osrith once more. She started in pain when he got as deep as he could. "I can go no further, you slack-cunted, well-used whore of the Gales." He banged his fingers as he pushed inside her, reaching her limit again before withdrawing them and reaching round to her sore nipples, returning to his tortuous treatment of them. Just when Osrith thought she could take no more, Griogier slid a hand to her front bump, catching it wetly between his fingers and moving it round in circles. Osrith hated herself as her body responded to its stimulation. He rubbed the wet around the contents of her lips, wiping the excess onto her stomach. He slapped her hard round the head. Osrith held in the whimper. "You will cry out." "I will not." Griogier stood back. Then, the moonlight reflected on the leather strap used to fasten open the cell door. Griogier had untied it. "Cry, damn you!" he hurrahed, bringing the leather down onto her back and legs and buttocks, then turned her body round. Her wrists scraped in the metal. This time Osrith did cry out as the leather caught her chest and ribs, taking off a line of skin, then another, flaying another across her stomach, breast and neck. He paused as she gulped for air. "Ah!" Griogier exclaimed, pleased, as he caught his breath from the exertion of flogging her. "She is your king's wife." Eric called from the back of the cell again, and again. Griogier ignored him as he pushed his groin against Osrith's leg. "Do you wish to see me plough a deep rut into her, Northman? Do you want to watch?" "Let her go," Eric shouted, chains clinking. "So, the Northman speaks for you," he snarled, then turned his head. "She is nothing." "You like what you hear? Do you have your cock out, pleasuring yourself?" "I have my eyes closed," called over Eric to Osrith. In Danish, he has his eyes closed. Osrith translated, defiantly. Then near Osrith's ear, Griogier's voice came again. "I am going to use you, sore girl, as will all the warriors here, when I leave the gates open, and you wide open for them to ride you." He kneed her legs wider, pulling her hips back, and Osrith heard the frictioned rubbing of the man wanking himself to hardness, his pre-cum slapping around juicily in his hand. Osrith braced herself. "Let him be small," she prayed, though the lump he was now rubbing wetly up and down her thigh told her otherwise. And then, suddenly, Osrith felt him falling away from her. She braced herself for the onslaught. "Osrith, who is that?" asked Eric. "Be warned, I will kill you too." But, fast hands removed Osrith from her chains and she slowly staggered around into a face she knew. Osrith blinked several times, checking she wasn't imagining Finolai standing in front of her. "Come," he encouraged. "No," Eric protested. "I have a horse. I fed it on." "Look, there's no time," Finolai said, and Osrith could only stare at him. "I am alive, thanks to you," he said. "I've been here since I got passage on a boat, from Tara." Finolai. But, he was dressed as a monk. He was a monk, here. Had he been watching her since she had arrived? "Come," Finolai encouraged. "I have your clothes, your sword." "How?" "No time, Osrith," he encouraged, the same Finolai she knew, poised to teach, sensible compassion. And, as Griogier began to stir, lethal, Osrith kicked him, hard, in the face with her unshod foot, not managing as hard as she would have liked, as her body ached from his abuse. She followed Finolai out of the cell, still barefoot, and Finolai flung a cloak over her shoulders, then stopped. "Get him out, too," Osrith implored, as Eric rattled his chains. Finolai paused for a moment. He was reluctant to stop, and Osrith knew why. People around the peripheries of the monastery and of the church were moving. Time was elemental if she were to escape. A minute later, and Eric was by her side, as they followed Finoli round to the stables. Just inside, tethered, a large beast was making hot vapors of steam by its nostrils. Osrith closed the stable door behind them, pulling Finoli close. "What happens, Osrith?" Eric asked, in Danish. "Who is he?" The question was too big, and Osrith answered it poorly. "A friend." She looked up to Finoli. "The best friend I ever had." And she wanted to tell Finoli everything. Her friend, who had cared for her, and had been kind to her, and had laughed with her, and had fled the Slavers because of her. Both betrayed, it would seem, by Domhnall. Eric seized her waist, moving towards the horse. But Osrith pulled away and drew Finoli to her. "You are my dearest friend," she whispered by Hydir. He held her close and whispered back, "You gave me life again." And then Osrith couldn't find the words. All that had happened since, in Irian, at Iona and Dund. A crash behind them drew them from their embrace. Finoli took up her hand and pressed silver into it. She pushed it away. "What I did, Finoli, I would have given to you 1,000 times." But Finoli pressed it still further. "Grioghair will not need it for some time. Or, perhaps ever." Osrith pushed it behind her cloak. Outside, footsteps, fast and frantic on the stone courtyard, told all three of them that their liberation had been discovered. Eric leapt onto the horse and Finoli helped Osrith up in front of him, passing up her clothes, clean and bundled neatly, and Buet, which she held to her body. "You need to go, now. Do you have a blade?" Eric shook his head. A shout outside and Osrith's heart began to quicken. Finoli passed him one. "Struggle," he told Osrith. "Pretend you go against your will," Finoli instructed. "There is fire," Eric said, looking beyond the stable. "I set it." "It's a cold night, don't you think?" "The guards at the northern gate have just discovered it open but can't close it as they are needed to help douse the flames." He smiled his cheeky, amiable smile at Osrith. "I am content here," he added, walking alongside the horse as Eric rode it from the stable. "I am safe, and I will not be discovered." "Half," Osrith said, suddenly. "She is safe, and back in the kitchen with her father. I invented a story that exonerated her." He smiled as the horse quickened. "I am content," Dri assured her, as Eric drew the knife to her throat. But Osrith's mind was in turmoil. Finoli, her friend, was not dead. He was alive. Alive. And she called over her shoulder as Eric cantered across the courtyard, "Come with us." But, in the noise and chaos, as Eric kicked a guard with one foot and, with the knife for Osrith's throat, stabbed another in the face. Then, he rode with all his might towards the north gate as, around them, Caolig blazed.